Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you guys are at. I hope you're having a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint here, and we're going to continue off our event dungeon video grind here. For those of you guys that are a little bit more on the experience side and you have maybe a little bit more variety of an option to work with, I wanted to introduce a team that pretty much would speed run amongst some of the faster, maybe not the fastest, but is pretty close, to sub-seconds runs, okay? So we are looking to farm Kirosa for pinpoint. Obviously, you know, it's out and about for your event dungeons or events, tournaments, the whole 9 yards. You're more than welcome to get yourself in there and run down with this. That's right. We're bringing back some Woo. But we also have some pretty interesting company. Now, in my previous video, I talked about Sulfurion being a really good asset to kind of manage the Volcano's debuff that likes to burn and cook your team out, especially when you start buffing and turn meter boosting, right? Well, on the flip side of that, we're going to bring on our mythical alternative, which is going to be Ashnar. I did recently acquire him, and I thought it would be a cool little way to showcase him to the community in terms of a PvE way to do it besides just PvP. So, Ashnar's going to be in this team, and I'm going to have a little surprise with Theodosa, too, as well. She's also going to be a part of this team, too. She is not mandatory, but she is a nice little complimentary option, and I'll explain more about the team in details. But in a summary of words, the way we're going to try to do is we're going to set up for Wukong to do one big shot, and he's going to basically destroy the entire dungeon, for the lack of better words. Now, I will be honest with you, first and foremost, there are a lot of things to watch out for in terms of potential failures, and I'm going to show you guys here. Hopefully the run doesn't fail, but I want you guys to see it. But it does have a chance for failure with the way that I have this one done, and I'll give you some options for a more consistent version that I don't currently have access to, which I'm free to play, so, you know, don't hold that against me. Anyways, with that being said, we have SoulSaint, we have Marius, our free-to-play option that you can get if you just do your missions, and then, of course, our two non-free-to-play champions, which is Theodosa and Ashnar. Now, their passes are what we're looking to abuse here more so than anything, but we're also going to take advantage of the fact that they do debuffs to enable Sun Wukong to do a little bit more, and then we're also going to use SoulSaint to inject Sun Wu to do some big damage. Now, keep in mind, pay attention to my blessing as well as my start level for Sun Wukong. You are going to need a pretty beefy build to make him pop. So it's not for the faint of heart. This is not for a progressing account that still may not have all of its bells and whistles locked and loaded. This is for the more established. So with that being said, let's give it a run here. The way it's going to go is we're going to have our mythicals at the top of the turn. They're going to basically do our setup, our debuffs, as well as turn meter enabling from, well, most of the debuff setup, I think, is what we're looking for. Marius is going to go after that, and he's going to kind of bring the enemy wave down to a reasonable threshold. We're looking to get roughly about less than 50% HP on some key targets, which are going to be the two that you see here stacked on top of each other. It's either Wither or Mortu that we want to see get sub 50% HP after Marius hits. Then SoulSaint's going to inject Sun Wukong, and Sun Wukong is going to go for a big pop, and that's going to be game. That's the goal. My team in particular, with this one is about, I want to say roughly about 10 to 11, 12-ish seconds with Theodosa. With alternative options, you can bring that down a bit. And obviously with Marius, there's alternative options too as well that can enable you to speed it up even more. And I'll show you that in just a moment. So let's do the run. Let's see if we can get lucky here with a good showcase here. Some things to keep in mind is that there is always a 3% chance that things fail. And that's where that kind of lowers the value of the team a bit. But you see it. Quick pop, 9-second run there, really, really fast. Yeah, that's it. We can go home, right? Well, let me explain. Ashnar, in particular, and I'm going to slow this fight down just a teeny bit. We're actually going to kind of slow it down. So, I have Theodosa at the top of the turn. Her passive is really, really strong in the aspect of being able to give more damage to allies that are hitting targets based off of their turn meter. Now, I am going to open up with the A3 and not the A2, and there's a reason why. One, Marius hits too hard, and two, if they die, Hefrak kills my Sun Wukong, and that kills this run, in a summary word. So, I tried it, but with the amount of debuffs and decreased defense and weaken going on the board, Marius just hits too hard. And that's kind of a problem, right? So, I have her open up, and I have her hit with the A3. This is just kind of like a throwaway ability just to kind of give us debuffs to work with, but more importantly, just to kind of get her in her second form. Then, Ashnar stays in his base form, and his passive, which is for every HP burn that's placed, 3% more damage is dealt per HP burn to our allies. So, Volganos burns us, Ashnar burns us, and we get a lot. And if you do the total math, if everybody has burns, you have our 5 versus their 5. That's a total of 10. So that's 30% more extra damage that we're going to be able to acquire. Now, I have them built in a certain way, too, that's going to enable even more damage on top of that, which I'll show you here shortly. But that's kind of the point of it, right? We place the burns, we're going to get our value. We also get turn meter boosting from Ashnar as well, which will kind of help push a little bit of our team and the middle portion of our team into play above the others. But that's okay, right? So we're going to have it go. It's going to go and do its A3, which we get turn meter boost. We also set up the weaken. Now, this enables Marius to go ahead and pop his A2 or his A3. It slows it down a little bit by like a second or two if you do the A3 because there's a little bit of an animation delay. I actually have it set to the A2 for right now, but if you feel like your pony needs a little bit more damage to get the Mortu into the threshold that we're looking to hit, then you can obviously A3 into the A2, but just be aware that if you're running a Marius that runs things like Soul Reap or something around those lines, be careful because if you go too low in the threshold, Soul Reap will kill the Mortu, and obviously Sun Wukong gets cooked by the Hefrak, right? And we don't want that. Then afterwards, now that we have all the setup and we have everything kind of on paper ready to go, I have Shu Zhen inject the Sun Wukong, which will allow the Sun Wukong to open up with his A2, having basically all the available things that can give him damage amplification. And then, of course, we let him pop with the A2. It should hit the target, which would be Mortu. I'm going to do it manually, but you've seen the run already once. You kind of get the idea of it, right? So he pops the A2, and the surplus damage that comes from Sun Wukong's A2 after killing the initial target wipes the board. It's big damage numbies. Like we love seeing big numbies, right? Now I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the team here a little bit. In this regard, we have Ashnar, who's gonna be the first one up on this list. He is our main damage debuff setup champion in a sense, right? I decided to put him in 9-piece Feral, which you're able to get from Siege. And that gives us an additional 5% per debuff. So he puts up at least 2, which is the HP burns as well as the weaken, right? So that's 10% damage we're also getting in addition to his passive. So 30% plus the 10% that we're getting. You see kind of the numbers are starting to stack up a little bit, right? There's nothing really else too fancy about his build. I mean, obviously I have no relic. I'm running Lightning Cage, which is more so designed for PvP content, but there really is nothing crazy for value there. And then, of course, his masteries are kind of just basically PvP oriented. So the main thing you want to hit is obviously a certain amount of speed, which I'll show you here real quickly. He is 310. He is the second fastest in this team. And then, of course, accuracy-wise, it's kind of overkill. I wasn't trying to hit this number, but the boss's accuracy check is, I believe, 525 in total. The more important one that you need to hit is kind of the Mortu and the Wither, which shout out to Hell Hades' stages tool. It kind of gives us a little bit of insight into this. Their resistance is around 490, so you want to kind of have 515 or higher. I actually went above and beyond to make sure that we also get the weaken on Kurosa so that when the pop does the splash damage, it also does enough there too. So you kind of want to have that all in play, right? So I use this as my base number, and then as I was building up Ashnar with whatever I had available for Feral, yeah, we kind of overkilled. Now, here's the funny thing about this too. You don't necessarily need to hit 525 specifically because his abilities also come with an ignore resistance factor in the as a part of the kit. So you can actually bring that number down a little bit. And if you do the numbers, you take that total resistance that any target has, minus the 20% of it. And then if you want to have at least a 95% success rate, add 25 on top of that, whatever that current resistance is at the time. And that's kind of where you need to be at accuracy-wise. So I'm way over the threshold. So the only way that it would fail is if it's a true 30% or 3%, sorry, factor, which that's a part of the game. It's nothing we can really do. And that's it. For Theodosa, though, it's a little bit more open-ended. She's actually at the top of the turn. She can either go before or after Ashnar. It really doesn't matter, but she just needs to be before everybody else in the summary words, right? And the reason why is because we want to flip her to her second form, which is where we get that they are beneath me passive, so the extra damage, right? She's built to be as fast as 321. That's what I was able to get out of her really quickly while maintaining that accuracy check that I was looking for. And from there, you flip her over and you have her open up with her A3. This will actually bring the turn meter down of the enemies, and that's good and bad depending on how you want to look at it. I was watching it when I first built this concept of this team. It's good because when you do your AoE with Marius, Mortu's passive can trigger, which will allow him to either gain turn meter or to gain his Imperil. If he gets his Peril, if he gets his Peril or if he gets his turn meter boosting before that, he may go before. And if the way it would go is this: either he doesn't have his Peril, which means that he's going to A2, I believe it is, which does the block buffs, which means that Shu Zhen's injection into Sun Wukong is going to be weaker. Or he gets Imperil plus the turn meter boosting, someone's dying, and you don't want that either. especially if it's going to be Wukong, who's going to be in the lead role. And it's actually important that he's in the lead role, and I'll explain why. Marius, however, he's a lot more simplistic. I just have him in a damage build here, and I think I have him going about roughly 308 speed. I think 308, 309 is kind of where you want to be at. It's just basically behind Theodosa and Ashnar, because they'll set up for him to do some decent damage. Obviously, you do the A2, which hits 3 times. Watch out for more too. And then, of course, you know, you get him low enough for Sun Wukong to pop. I'm going to skip Sun Wukong's build here for the most part. I do have Marius in a Cat's Gaze for extra damage and whatnot. Same thing how you would normally use him. It's kind of like almost like a mix of a lopsided PvP build that I use, and then just kind of with enough damage and non-stone skin. It's actually important that we don't have any of our champions in stone skin because the burns. We want to let the burns go through, right? So I took him out of stone skin. I just kind of gave him some miscellaneous pieces just so they can still hit his damage numbers and still be at the speed he needs to be at, and then we let him rock, right? But for Shu Xin, if you didn't already see it, we had the protected buffs. She's in 9-piece protection. That's pretty much all you really need to worry about for the most part. And we have her going at 295 speed, which with the turn meter boosting that we're getting from Ashnar, as well as the turn meter decrease that we're getting for Theodosa, it allows her to kind of get into where she needs to be at to inject Sun Wukong to pop, and that's pretty much it, right? There's nothing else that's too fancy about her build outside of that. That's really basically just want to be her faster than the enemy wave. If you want to be really, really careful about it, you can go like 300 plus, which I think is where Wither's speed is at. With Ashnar in play, this is going to speed it up, so there's no way that you get cut in on, right? So the higher you go, just make sure that they go in that turn order. You can go as high as you want. That's fine. Sun Wukong, though, you don't want him to go fast at all. We're going to inject him. That's the whole point of Shu Xin, right? So we made him hit. Now, the goal here was to introduce Merciless, but there's a key thing that's going to be really important about this this concept. That's I think shout out to some of the community members in not only my streams but also the Mad Boys. If you're listening in, they're really, really smart about being able to put 2 to 2 together. But we use Merciless and as much damage as we can get. So you'll see a little bit of elements of Slayer, mostly Merciless. We went for the 6-piece Merciless to get that ignore % defense. And then, honestly, Stone Skin was only introduced because that had one of the better banners I had for an attack type nuker like Sun Wukong in that faction. So that's where it came at, right? Our stat numbers are pretty beefy, and that's where it kind of gets a little interesting. I got him over 10k attack, plus 374-ish crit damage. I would obviously like it to be in the 400s if I could help it. I'm free to play, so my damage isn't too crazy. And here's the key thing about having Shu Xin in this party, in this team, is that you don't need to be higher than or anything less than 70% crit damage, or crit rate, excuse me, because she is going to inject him and she gives increased crit rate as a part of her buffs. So when he does his big pop, he's going to be going in with 100% crit rate. And that's all you need. Just make sure he's over 70 and then just give him as much damage as possible. And that's kind of the long and short of it, right? But that's not all. The Relic. This is kind of interesting. Now, I've seen some back and forth between options for like either using Cat's Gaze or in particular Core Crescent, which I lean towards first and foremost. Now, there are 2 ways you could do this. With Sun Wukong, if you decide to go down the Cat's Gaze rate, that angle, then you can probably be better off facilitating running like triple Zeal or 2x Zeal, or as much Zeal as you can, along with like some damage set accessories like Merciless or Slayer, to name a few, to really bring out the stats for him. But you could do Cat's Gaze plus triple Zeal and whatnot. That'll work just fine. Just got to make sure you hit some decent stats. If you go Gore Crescent, it's more likely that you're going to want to try to go a little bit more Merciless. It leans and skews in that way. That's not to say that Zeal is bad on the build at all, just so you're aware. Now, some other key things that I will say that is kind of cool about Gore Crescent, and this is kind of just a little bit of like a little bit of a nod towards it. It's not mandatory, but it's not hurtful either. The trigger for Gore Crescent, when you pop the first person, so like if it's more 2 or Wither, for example, in this case, you kill somebody. The next attack or the next damage that comes from that scales up by 20% more. That actually procs going into Kirosa, I believe. And then on top of that too, we went with 2 particular gemstones, which are, I believe they're called Dungeon Delver. They give 10% more damage in dungeon battles. Now, this is the event dungeon. It's in the dungeons tab, so it does allow for us to get 20% more because gemstones stack. So we got 2 extra one of those. And then, of course, I also went Unbowed Might for the triangular gemstone. And the reason why is that this is kind of how I beefed up that deficit that I had with my crit damage. I don't know if you heard me. I kind of wish it was over 400. The 10k attack's solid. That's good. The crit damage, I kind of wanted a little bit more. I make up for it with Unbowed Might. which is for every debuff they are under, it stacks up to a total of 30%. So that 374 or whatever I was at goes up to that 400 range pretty consistently as you get more debuffs, right? And if you think about it, Ashnar is putting on HP burn himself, and you also technically can use alternative champions, which will enable this even more. And I'll explain that in terms of alternative options in a minute. But that's pretty much the long and short of it. Outside of that, though, we did go Crushing Ren. I think you can do that, or maybe something like Heaven's Cast if you're running a lower blessing. But I would be fairly warning you that, like, if you start getting below like 4-star blessings, it gets a lot harder because you're missing not only on the blessing passive benefit, but you're also losing out on crit damage and some big primary stats, which are very important for him to do what he's got to do. Now, I kept him in my original PvP build many moons ago. I don't use him very much anymore, so I'd be a little bit more open to it. However, it costs gems for me to do, so I kind of just worked around it. Depending on your composition pattern, you can use kind of something similar. You know, obviously getting the step bonuses, you know, putting a little bit more with lower steel. So like Merciless gives lower steel a lot more value. The only thing I would kind of maybe consider some shifting towards is maybe introducing Stoke to Fury. This was something that was given to me by one of my clannies that would be kind of like a better case usage, but depending on the composition that you run, you get more % damage increase per debuff that's placed on you. So it is very important to keep that in mind if you're ever building it out. You can use these masteries, but if you go what I'm going to show you here in not too long and not too, you know, in a short period here, it may be more favorable for you to consider this one depending on what you're using for your team. So, with all that being said, though, that was pretty much the main concept of this team. I'm going to show you some alternatives and some things to watch out for. Obviously, the most important thing about this team, I think Sun Wukong is pretty solid where I have him at. I don't think that any chance failures are pretty much on him. It's actually, believe it or not, on 2 other champions, which is going to be your Ashnar. That weaken is very important. Also, the HP burns help out quite a bit, too. So, he's got a lot of checks that you kind of need to make sure you're good in. Number 2 is actually going to be your damage dealer that is bringing the wave down. You don't want to overkill them and end up like, you know, you don't want to do too much damage where you kill them, but you don't want to do too less to a point where you're not hitting them low enough. And here's the problem why. The AI for Sun Wukong is a little wonky, and I think it's kind of with the intention that it's trying to optimize the best damage. It's going to look for the best target. And although we know that like the defense for Mortu and the stat lineup for Mortu is not too bad, as burns are getting placed by the team and by Volcanos, Volcanos' passive, I believe it is, let's see here, right here on his, yeah, it is his passive. When he has 2 faction allies, the entire team's demon spawn, so he's going to get this guaranteed. He's getting a stacks of, getting stacks and buffs and basically amplifying him up even more, which makes it harder to kill him. He has that built-in mitigation, which is right here. Damage received by this champion is decreased by 50% while this skill is not on cooldown. So, in tandem with all his passives that he's getting from his abilities, it makes him tanky. And although we know that, the AI looks at it like, okay, well, out of all the options he has, if these 2 aren't really at the threshold that he's got going, he's going to be like, oh, we're going to pop Volcanos because he's got a negative affinity for Sun Wukong. I think that's what it's causing to do, to cause him to skew in that favor, even though we as players know that. The AI, if you're running this auto, can be kind of a little bit of an issue. That's where making sure Marius hits just enough, or making sure your damage dealer of your choice hits just enough, is important because you need to make sure that they're under that threshold. You want them at least under 50, ideally closer to like the 40% range, 30% range or lower. Now, as you get too low, you know, with Soul Reap, then that could be a problem. You can run Cruelty as an option, that's fine. I personally like Soul Reap for my champion on Marius being, you know, PvP related, and I don't want to change too much of that. So I kind of just take the L if that does happen, unfortunately. But if you use alternative champions, which I'll show you here in just a moment, you have plenty of options that can technically get you where you need to be. I think the best in slot option that I've built for people so far was Baron, believe it or not. He's neutral affinity. And he also has a pretty decent Sky Piercer ability, which gets you just enough to where you need to be at. So a pretty solid build there. His animation sequence is also really quickly, so that's what allows you to go super fast. I think he's probably best in slot. You could use other champions. I was recommended, I believe it was Herndig. Herndig is another option that I think had a lot of value, and I think it is the AoE, so Arcane Tempest, that people use, where you bring him pretty low. It does also enable the decreased defense, which I think if you set it up just right, with the right amount of damage output, he does the job. I haven't used it personally, so I can't 100% vouch for it, but I have used Baron in my compositions for other people, and then, of course, for my own account, which you're seeing right here, is Marius, so that's what makes it tick. As for Theodosia, I know not a lot of you guys don't really have. You really don't have access to maybe some of the mythical, like a mythical like her. She's fairly new. I believe I still have him set up, so let's see if we are lucky enough to be able to do this. We have Gerbtuck. Let me see. Let's check and see if he's actually available still. He is. So I have him in that range that's faster than our Ashnor, so he goes at the top of the turn. We have him open up with his A3. So we're still benefiting from passives, and I don't know if you see a correlating experience here where we're just playing into passives. You amplify the damage, right? So we open up with the A3, which gives us the poison on our team, which triggers his passive, giving us more damage and I think the percentage is 22.5% for one poison set, because he puts up 3 poisons on the team, and that's given to Sun Wukong when Sun Wukong does his pop. It does the same thing. Actually, believe it or not, his animation sequence is faster than Theodosia, because Theodosia has to transform, so it's just as good. I'll do a quick run here real quick to show you. Hopefully, we don't get any negative drawbacks from some things here, but for the most part, that's pretty much the main thing to watch out for, is that you hit all the stuff there. Here's a perfect example. We missed our opportunity to hit Weaken here, and honestly, our damage here is a little bit lower, so I do want to be transparent about that. I think Baron and maybe Herndig might be a little bit better. And they're more consistent in that regard. But that is a 3% check. I mean, obviously, we have like over 600 and the ignore resistant factor from Ashnor, but it can happen. And I don't want you guys to be like, hey, this thing is failing sometimes. And it's like, well, that's why. Now, I'm still going to try. I'm going to force it to do this, but I think typically in a scenario like this, because the HP is high here, no weaken here, he would normally go there. But we're going to try it here regardless and see if we hit enough pop. We obviously didn't, so it wasn't enough. And this would cause the failure. So I think that's a good showcase for it. But Gerbtuck can be placed in this team, and it would do just fine. Like, I'm going to go into, we actually hit another run here. I'm letting it slow sequence showing the inevitable death, which is unfortunate. But let's see. Let's show a quick one now. We got the HP burns here. Let's see if we got enough damage. We're in a good spot. Now we just need the inject, a pop, and you see it. 7-second run. 6 seconds, I think, is my best. I'm recording this, so it's obviously messing with some of my resources here. But pretty fast, right? Those are some of the things that we watch out for. Gerbtuck is not the only one. As long as you get someone that can give you some decent damage passive increase, you got it. I would even argue that this one might be best in slot because of the consistency of it, which is Feral. Feral placing increase Veil, increase Res, which will help when Shuzhen injects Sun Wukong. He's got over 4 buffs then at that point, and you get 20%. Now, if we're going off of like values of like damage percentage increase, I think it goes Theodosia, Gerbtuck, and then Feral, because it goes 25% of whatever the target turn meter is. By the time Shuzhen injects Sun Wukong, the Mortu / Wither are already back up to 100%, or sometimes even further than that, which means you're getting a lot more out of that X percentage of damage. And then, of course, Gerbtuck is a solid 22.5%, and then, of course, Feral being 20% for damage. Your damage metrics, if you're interested in it. But you ain't got to worry about resisting or anything kind of going bad because you get the buffs there. So Feral is pretty safe, too, as well. You can technically do a combination of like those 3 champions in partnership with this team to kind of push for a big damage spike. It's not too bad. It's not too bad at all. And I think my best in slot team, if I were to recommend it, would probably be with Baron and Feral or Gerbtuck. Theodosia is not mandatory per se, but she was a nice little thing that I kind of wanted to throw in there. So you kind of see it. You kind of see it. But yeah, it does fail from time to time because of those 3% factors. But I think for the most part, outside of that which I can't really control too much of, I will say this too. Marius, I would also argue that if you have Baron, try to use Baron more so than anything, because especially with like Helm Smasher and not using things like maybe you could probably use War Master, probably would be better for consistency purposes. There's a sliding factor of damage where, like you saw in that previous example, I did have Wither under that weekend, even though I didn't go on Mortu, and she still took less damage as a byproduct of just that scaling factor. We just didn't have enough damage to really make that pop worthwhile. Marius is a little inconsistent, and that'll be my only criticism about using him there. Baron, however, I felt once you got a solid build locked in, you could use something similar to like either Cat's Gaze or Gore Crescent, depending on what your set bonuses are. It does the job. Trust me. I've tried it. It's actually more consistent in my opinion. I think that one's my tried and true if I were to recommend it. But I don't have Baron to show on my account for this round, so I'm gonna kind of let that go as it is. With that being said, you guys let me know in the comments below if you found something maybe even more consistent, more guaranteed. I'm always open to maybe showcasing something like that. You let me know in the comments below. And with that being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as always remember, stay ascended.
nigga.